Ngozi's world shatters when she's abandoned by her family after an unthinkable discovery. She's pregnant, and her pregnancy lasts far beyond 9 months. Branded as cursed and preyed upon by those she trusts, Ngozi fights to protect her unborn child and uncover the truth behind her mysterious condition. As betrayal looms and hope flickers, will she rise above the odds or lose everything? A gripping tale of survival and resilience awaits. Before we dive into this powerful story, let us know where you're tuning in from, and if you find it compelling, don't forget to hit subscribe. Ngozi always dreamed of becoming a teacher. Standing under the shade of the mango tree in her family's compound, she often practiced her lessons, pretending the goats and chickens were her students. Life in the village was simple but tough. Each day began at dawn with the relentless pounding of yam or the carrying of water from the stream, but Ngozi didn't mind. She had hope, and hope kept her going. That hope was shattered the day she discovered she was pregnant. She had tried to ignore the signs, missed cycles, morning sickness, the tender swelling in her body, but when she finally whispered her secret to her best friend, Chioma, the truth became undeniable. Ngozi, Chioma said, her voice trembling, "You have to tell your family. This is serious." Ngozi knew Chioma was right, but fear gripped her. Her father, a devout man with a booming voice, often reminded the family of the importance of tradition and reputation. Her mother, though gentler, was no less strict. Ngozi could already hear their judgment, feel the sting of their rejection. Yet, she couldn't hide it forever. That evening, after dinner, she summoned the courage to speak. The reaction was worse than she imagined. "You're what?" her father bellowed, the veins in his neck bulging as he stood, towering over her. "Pregnant? At your age? In this house?" Her mother sat frozen, her face pale with shock, while Ngozi's younger siblings huddled in the corner, wide-eyed and silent. "It's a disgrace," her father continued. "Do you know what people will say? Do you want to bring shame to this family?" Ngozi tried to explain, her voice trembling. "Papa, I didn't mean for this to happen." But he silenced her with a wave of his hand. "Leave this house," he said coldly. "You're no longer my daughter." Ngozi's heart shattered. She turned to her mother, silently begging for support, but her mother's gaze was cast downward. "Ngozi," her mother whispered, "you've made your choice. Now you must live with it." That night, Ngozi packed a small bag of clothes and left her family's compound. She had nowhere to go, no plan. The village was quiet under the moonlight, but every shadow seemed alive with judgment. As she walked, she thought of the father of her child, an older boy from a neighboring village. He had promised to take care of her, but when she told him about the pregnancy, his face had darkened. "Ngozi, I can't deal with this right now," he had said before vanishing from her life. By morning, Ngozi found herself at the edge of the village market. She sat under a tree, clutching her bag, her stomach growling. Vendors set up their stalls, casting curious glances her way. Whispers began to spread. "Is that Ngozi? The one who got pregnant? Her own family disowned her, can you imagine? Such a shame." As the sun rose higher, the whispers turned into stares. Ngozi tried to block them out, but the weight of their judgment was unbearable. She felt the tears spill down her cheeks. What had she done to deserve this? Over the next few weeks, Ngozi drifted from place to place, relying on the kindness of strangers for food and shelter. Some took pity on her, offering her a bowl of rice or a corner to sleep in. Others treated her with scorn, calling her cursed. "A child raising a child," they sneered. What kind of future will she have? Months passed, and Ngozi's pregnancy showed no signs of progress. Her stomach swelled slightly, but not enough to suggest she was nearing labor. The villagers began to talk. "It's not normal," one woman whispered to another. "She's been pregnant for almost a year now. Maybe it's a punishment from the gods." Ngozi's fear grew with every passing day. She had no one to turn to, no answers. Her body felt heavy, sluggish, as if it were betraying her. Each night, she lay awake, wondering what was wrong with her. Was it really a curse? Was she being punished for her mistakes? One afternoon, as Ngozi walked through the market, her vision blurred, and her legs buckled beneath her. She crumpled to the ground, clutching her stomach. The vendors and shoppers rushed to her side, their faces filled with a mix of concern and curiosity. "Ngozi, are you all right?" someone asked. But Ngozi could barely hear them. Her thoughts swirled as darkness closed in. Was this how it would end? Alone, abandoned, and broken? As the world faded around her, one thought burned in her mind. She had to fight for herself and for the life growing inside her. The market's whispers grew louder as they carried her away, their superstitions running wild. "What kind of child stays unborn for so long?" someone muttered. But for the first time, Ngozi felt the stirrings of resolve. Whatever lay ahead, she would face it. She would not be defeated. When Ngozi awoke, the warm scent of herbal tea filled her nose. The faint light of a single oil lamp flickered across a small, cluttered room. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Her body felt heavy, her stomach ached, and her head throbbed. Slowly, memories of collapsing in the market trickled back, and panic surged through her. "You're awake," a soft voice said. Ngozi turned her head to see a woman sitting by her side, her face kind but weary. She looked to be in her 40s, wrapped in a faded wrapper with a matching headscarf. "I found you in the market," the woman continued. "You fainted. My name is Ani Ifeoma. Don't worry, you're safe now." Ngozi tried to sit up, but the woman gently pressed her back down. "Rest," Auntie Ifeoma said. "You've been through a lot." Ngozi's instinct was to refuse help. She had learned to distrust kindness after so many villagers had turned her away or treated her like a burden. But exhaustion won out, and she allowed herself to sink back into the thin mattress beneath her. "Thank you," she murmured. Over the next few days, Ngozi stayed in Auntie Ifeoma's modest home at the edge of the village. The house was small but cozy, filled with the smell of spices and dried herbs. Ifeoma was attentive, bringing her food, cleaning her few belongings, and even bathing her when she was too weak to do so herself. For the first time in months, Ngozi felt a sliver of comfort. But unease lingered in her heart. The villagers who gossiped about her had vanished from sight, and while Auntie Ifeoma was kind, there was something about her sharp eyes and overly sweet smile that made Ngozi wary. One evening, as they sat together over a plate of yam porridge, Ifeoma began to ask questions. "Ngozi, do you know how far along you are?" she asked, her voice casual. Ngozi hesitated. I don't know. It's been over a year." Auntie Ifeoma's brow furrowed. "Over a year?" she repeated. "That's not normal. You need proper help. Have you seen a doctor?" Ngozi shook her head, shame prickling her skin. "I tried once, but they said I needed money. I didn't have any." Auntie Ifeoma reached across the table and grasped Ngozi's hand. "Don't worry, my dear. I'll help you. No one should face this alone." For the first time, Ngozi allowed herself to hope. Maybe this woman truly cared. Maybe she wasn't like the others. But even as she clung to that hope, doubt gnawed at her. Why would someone be so kind to a stranger? Weeks passed, and Ngozi began to regain some strength. She spent her days sweeping Ifeoma's compound, cooking meals, and tending to small tasks. Though Ifeoma had insisted she didn't need to repay her kindness, Ngozi felt obligated to help in any way she could. One day, while cleaning the living room, she came across a locked drawer in Ifeoma's desk. It rattled slightly when she bumped it, and curiosity got the better of her. She crouched down and pulled the drawer open a fraction. Inside, she saw something that made her blood run cold, a stack of papers, each one bearing a photograph of a mother and child. Next to each photograph were handwritten notes, names, ages, locations. Ngozi's hands trembled as she closed the drawer. What was Auntie Ifeoma doing with these documents? Her heart pounded as a terrible suspicion began to form. That evening, Ngozi sat quietly as Ifeoma served her dinner. The older woman chattered cheerfully, but Ngozi could barely hear her. Her mind was racing. She needed to know the truth, but she had to be careful. "Ifeoma," she said suddenly, interrupting the woman mid-sentence. "What will happen after my baby is born?" Auntie Ifeoma's smile faltered for a split second, but she recovered quickly. "Oh, my dear, we'll figure that out when the time comes. For now, you just focus on staying healthy." But Ngozi noticed something in her eyes, a flicker of something cold and calculating. The warmth in Ifeoma's voice no longer felt genuine. Ngozi swallowed hard, her appetite gone. She had to find out more. That night, Ngozi waited until she was certain Ifeoma had gone to bed. Moving as quietly as possible, she crept back to the locked drawer. This time, she opened it fully and pulled out the papers. As she leafed through them, her worst fears were confirmed. The notes weren't just about mothers and children, they were records of transactions. Dates, amounts of money, and descriptions of buyers were scrawled across the pages. Ngozi's breath caught in her throat. Auntie Ifeoma wasn't just helping vulnerable women, she was selling their children. Terror surged through her as the reality of her situation sank in. Ifeoma wasn't her savior, she was a predator, waiting for the moment to strike. Ngozi realized she had to escape, but the question was how. The next morning, Ifeoma greeted her as usual, but Ngozi could barely meet her eyes. Every word the woman spoke felt like a lie, every gesture laced with menace. As they ate breakfast, Ifeoma's tone turned serious. "Ngozi," she said, "there's someone I'd like you to meet. A doctor in the city. He can help you deliver safely. We'll leave in a few days." Ngozi nodded, forcing a smile, but inside, panic clawed at her. She had no doubt that this doctor was part of Ifeoma's scheme. If she went with her, she might never see her baby or freedom again. As Ifeoma stood to clear the table, she leaned close to Ngozi and whispered, "Don't worry, my dear. Everything will be taken care of." The words sent a chill down Ngozi's spine. She had to leave, and she had to do it soon. Ifeoma's trap was closing in, and time was running out. Ngozi's heart raced as she lay awake that night, replaying Auntie Ifeoma's words over and over. She had only days before being taken to the so-called doctor. She could no longer ignore the truth. Ifeoma planned to sell her baby. Fear twisted her stomach, but beneath it, a flicker of determination ignited. She would not let her child become a transaction. She had to escape. The next morning, Ifeoma was unusually cheerful as she prepared breakfast. "Ngozi," she said, sliding a bowl of porridge across the table, "why don't you go to the market today and pick up some vegetables? Get some fresh air." Ngozi nodded, masking her growing anxiety. She realized Ifeoma was trying to keep her at ease, perhaps unaware that she had uncovered the truth. Still, the market offered an opportunity to gather her thoughts and maybe even find help. The market was bustling with activity, the air thick with the scent of roasted maize and dried fish. Ngozi moved through the crowd, her eyes darting from face to face, searching for someone who might listen to her plight. But who could she trust? Many of the villagers already viewed her as cursed. Would they believe her, or would they side with Ifeoma? Her wandering brought her to the edge of the market where a small clinic sat nestled between two stalls. The sight of the faded medical sign sparked a glimmer of hope. Swallowing her nerves, she stepped inside. A kind-looking nurse with round glasses and a gentle smile greeted her. "Good morning," the nurse said. "How can I help you?" Ngozi hesitated. I need to see someone. It's about my pregnancy." The nurse gestured for her to sit. "Of course. Let me take a look." As the nurse conducted a brief examination, her brow furrowed. "You've been pregnant for how long?" she asked. "Over a year," Ngozi replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Almost 2. The nurse froze, disbelief flickering across her face. "That's unusual," she said carefully. "You need proper care. This isn't something I've seen before." Ngozi swallowed hard. "There's something else. The woman I'm staying with. I think she's planning to take my baby. To sell it." The nurse's face darkened, and she leaned closer. "Ngozi, listen to me. You need to leave that place immediately. I've heard rumors about women disappearing after staying with her. If what you're saying is true, you're in danger. The nurse introduced herself as Sister Amara and offered to help Ngozi escape. I know someone in the city, a real doctor who can help you. But we have to act fast, she said. Does Ifeoma know you've come here? No, Ngozi replied, her voice trembling. She thinks I'm at the market. Good, Sister Amara said. We'll make a plan, but you must be careful. Don't let her suspect anything. Ngozi nodded, her heart pounding. For the first time in months, she felt a shred of hope. But she also knew the risks. If Ifeoma found out, there would be no escape. Back at Ifeoma's house, Ngozi forced herself to act normal, even as panic simmered beneath the surface. Ifeoma was bustling about, packing a small bag. We'll leave tomorrow morning, she announced. The doctor is expecting us. Ngozi's stomach twisted. She hadn't expected the timeline to move so quickly. She excused herself to the bedroom, claiming she needed to rest, but instead, she sat by the window, plotting her next move. As the sun set, Ngozi heard a knock at the door. She peered out cautiously and saw a familiar figure, one she hadn't seen in over a year. Her breath caught. It was Chijioke, the father of her child. Chijioke? Ngozi whispered as Ifeoma let him inside. He looked older, more weathered, but his eyes still held the same earnestness she remembered. Ngozi, he said, his voice tight with emotion. I've been looking for you. Your family, he hesitated, glancing at Ifeoma, who stood nearby, watching them with a strange smile. Ngozi stepped forward. What about my family? They hid your letters, your messages, Chijioke said. I didn't abandon you, Ngozi. I didn't even know where you were until now. Ngozi's emotions surged relief, anger, confusion. Why now? Why are you here? Chijioke glanced nervously at Ifeoma, who interjected. Oh, he's just here to meddle, she said smoothly. Ngozi doesn't need him. She's under my care now. Ngozi felt a chill at her words. Ifeoma's care was a prison, and Chijioke's sudden appearance complicated everything. She didn't know if she could trust him, but she had to take the risk. That night, Ngozi confided in Chijioke, telling him everything, her prolonged pregnancy, Ifeoma's schemes, and Sister Amara's offer to help. He listened intently, his expression darkening with each word. We'll get you out, he said. We'll go to the city. I'll take care of you and the baby. But Ngozi wasn't ready to trust him completely. You left once before, she said. How do I know you won't leave again? Chijioke met her gaze. I made a mistake, Ngozi. I'm here now. Let me prove it. As the house settled into silence, Ngozi began packing her meager belongings. She knew Ifeoma would be suspicious if she saw her preparing to leave, but she didn't care. The trap was closing, and she had no choice but to act. The plan was set. At dawn, Sister Amara would meet them at the edge of the village with a car. Chijioke would distract Ifeoma long enough for Ngozi to slip away. But as the hours ticked by, a sickening feeling settled in her stomach. Ifeoma was cunning. Would she suspect the escape? And if she did, how far would she go to stop them? The faint glow of dawn crept through the window as Ngozi whispered a prayer under her breath. This was her chance. Her life, and the life of her unborn child, depended on it. Ngozi's heart pounded in the pre-dawn silence as she crept toward the front door, clutching her small bundle of belongings. Every creak of the wooden floor seemed to echo like thunder, and she froze, listening for any sign of movement. Ifeoma's room was dark, but Ngozi couldn't shake the feeling that the older woman was watching, waiting. At the edge of the village, Chijioke was already waiting in the shadows near the agreed meeting spot. He raised a hand when he saw her approach, his face tense. Are you ready? He whispered. Ngozi nodded, her voice barely audible. Sister Amara said she'd be here soon. The plan was simple but dangerous. Chijioke would keep Ifeoma distracted long enough for Sister Amara to take Ngozi to safety in the city. They both knew that if Ifeoma realized what was happening, she would stop at nothing to drag Ngozi back. Just as the first rays of sunlight pierced the horizon, Sister Amara's old car appeared in the distance, kicking up dust as it rattled down the road. Ngozi exhaled in relief as the nurse stepped out, her presence a beacon of safety in the oppressive uncertainty that had consumed her life. "We need to hurry," Sister Amara said, opening the passenger door. "Ifeoma won't let this go quietly." Ngozi hesitated, glancing at Chijioke. "What about you? Won't she come after you?" Chijioke gave her a reassuring smile. "Let me handle Ifeoma. Just focus on getting to safety." Before Ngozi could argue, a shout rang out behind them. Her blood ran cold. It was Ifeoma. "There you are." Ifeoma's voice was sharp and furious, cutting through the still morning air. She stood a few meters away, her face twisted with rage. "Ngozi, what do you think you're doing?" Ngozi's instincts screamed at her to run, but her feet felt rooted to the ground. Chijioke stepped between them, his stance protective. "She's leaving, Ifeoma. You can't stop her." "Oh, you naive fool," Ifeoma spat, her voice dripping with venom. "You think you can just take her away? Do you have any idea who you're dealing with?" Sister Amara stepped forward, her voice steady but firm. "Ngozi is coming with me. If you have a problem, take it up with the authorities." Ifeoma's laugh was cold and mocking. "The authorities? In this village? They won't believe a cursed girl and a meddling nurse over me." She took a step closer, her presence looming. "Ngozi belongs to me. She owes me." Ngozi felt something snap inside her. For too long, she had been silent, letting others speak for her, letting fear dictate her actions. But not this time. "No!" Ngozi's voice rang out, strong and defiant. She stepped forward, meeting Ifeoma's gaze with unwavering determination. "I don't belong to you, and I don't owe you anything. You lied to me. You tried to take my baby. I won't let you control me anymore." For a moment, Ifeoma seemed stunned by Ngozi's outburst, but the shock quickly gave way to cold fury. "You ungrateful little..." Sister Amara didn't wait for her to finish. "Get in the car, Ngozi. Now." Ngozi didn't hesitate. She climbed into the passenger seat as Chijioke stepped in front of Ifeoma, blocking her path. "Leave her alone," he said, his voice low but resolute. Ifeoma's eyes narrowed. "You'll regret this." Chijioke didn't move, even as Ifeoma took a threatening step toward him. Behind him, Sister Amara started the engine, and the car lurched forward. Ngozi turned to look out the back window, her heart hammering as she watched Ifeoma grow smaller in the distance. For the first time in months, she felt a glimmer of hope. The journey to the city was tense and quiet. Ngozi clutched her bundle of belongings tightly, her thoughts racing. Was Chijioke safe? Would Ifeoma come after her? And what awaited her at the end of this road? Sister Amara's voice broke through her thoughts. "We'll get you to the hospital first," she said. "You need proper care. And after that, we'll figure out the next steps." Ngozi nodded, though her stomach churned with uncertainty. She glanced down at her swollen belly, her hands resting protectively over it. "Do you think my baby will be okay?" she asked hesitantly. Sister Amara gave her a reassuring smile. "You're stronger than you think, Ngozi. Your baby will be fine." Hours later, they arrived at a small, bustling hospital on the outskirts of the city. The doctor who greeted them was kind but stern, his brow furrowing as he examined Ngozi. "This isn't a normal pregnancy," he said after a lengthy assessment. "It's a rare condition, but it's not unheard of. With the right care, we can help you deliver safely." Ngozi felt a wave of relief wash over her, but it was quickly followed by a pang of fear. Delivering safely was only one part of the battle. What would happen afterward? She still had no home, no family, and no clear future. As the doctor continued to explain the next steps, Ngozi's mind drifted back to Ifeoma. She had escaped the immediate danger, but she knew the older woman wouldn't give up so easily. Ifeoma was out there, angry and vengeful, and Ngozi would have to stay one step ahead to protect her child. For now, though, she allowed herself to breathe, even if just for a moment. She had taken the first step toward freedom. The chains that had bound her for so long were beginning to break. Ngozi's breath came in shallow gasps as the doctor's voice echoed in the small hospital room. "We have to act now," he said firmly. The prolonged pregnancy has put a strain on your body. This delivery won't be easy, but with surgery, we can save both you and your baby. Ngozi nodded weakly, her hands trembling as she gripped the sides of the hospital bed. Fear gnawed her, but so did determination. For the first time in years, she was in a place where people wanted to help her, not exploit her. She wouldn't let the shadows of her past claim this moment. Sister Amara sat by her side, her warm hand resting on Ngozi's. "You're not alone in this," she said softly. "You've come so far, Ngozi. You're stronger than you know." Ngozi swallowed back the lump in her throat, summoning every ounce of courage. "Let's do it," she whispered. The hours that followed blurred into a whirlwind of pain and exhaustion. The surgical lights above her felt blinding, the beeping monitors a constant reminder of how fragile her situation was. But Ngozi held on, clinging to the thought of her baby's future. After what felt like an eternity, a piercing cry filled the room. It was the most beautiful sound Ngozi had ever heard. The doctor held up a small, wriggling bundle. "It's a boy," he announced, smiling. Tears streamed down Ngozi's face as they placed her son in her arms. His tiny fingers curled around hers, and in that moment, every hardship she had endured felt worth it. "I'll protect you," she whispered to him. "No one will ever hurt you." The days following the birth were a mix of joy and uncertainty. Ngozi's body ached, and her energy was low, but she refused to let exhaustion consume her. She spent hours watching her baby sleep, marveling at his perfect, tiny features. Yet, the weight of her reality loomed large. She had escaped Ifeoma and delivered her baby safely, but what now? Where would they go? How would she provide for him? Sister Amara stepped in with answers. "Ngozi," she said one morning, sitting beside her hospital bed, "I've spoken to a women's shelter here in the city. They can give you a place to stay and help you get back on your feet." Ngozi's chest tightened with emotion. "Why are you helping me so much?" she asked. "You barely know me." Sister Amara smiled. "Because I see strength in you. You've survived so much, and you still fought for your child. That kind of courage deserves a second chance." As Ngozi began to recover, she received an unexpected visitor. Her grandmother, frail but resolute, entered the hospital room with tears in her eyes. "Ngozi," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I've been looking for you." Ngozi stared at her in shock. "Grandma? What are you doing here?" Her grandmother sat beside her, reaching out to hold her hand. "I couldn't stand by while the family turned their back on you. I've been sending help through Sister Amara, but I didn't think I'd see you again." Ngozi's heart swelled with a mixture of anger and relief. "You knew what they did to me. Why didn't you stop them?" "I tried," her grandmother said, her voice breaking. "But they wouldn't listen. I couldn't change their minds, but I never stopped caring for you." Ngozi held her grandmother's hand tightly, her anger softening. For the first time, she felt a glimmer of reconciliation. Perhaps she wasn't as alone as she had thought. Weeks later, news of Ifeoma's trafficking ring being exposed reached the hospital. Sister Amara had worked with the authorities to report everything Ngozi had uncovered, leading to Ifeoma's arrest. Ngozi felt a sense of justice, but knew there were still many women like her who needed help. As she cradled her son one evening, Ngozi made a promise to herself. "I'll use my story to help others," she said softly. "I'll make sure no one else goes through what I did." Months passed, and Ngozi thrived in the women's shelter. With support, she began taking small steps toward her dream of teaching, enrolling in classes while balancing motherhood. Her story became one of hope and inspiration, shared with young mothers in the shelter who saw her as a beacon of resilience. One sunny afternoon, Ngozi stood outside the shelter, her son giggling in her arms. She looked out at the bustling city, a place that had once terrified her but now symbolized freedom. She had faced betrayal, abandonment, and danger, yet here she was, stronger than ever. "You'll have a better life than I did," she whispered to her son, planting a kiss on his forehead. "I'll make sure of it." As she walked back into the shelter, the sound of women chatting and children laughing filled the air. It wasn't the life she had imagined, but it was one she had fought for. And in the faces of those she had inspired, she saw the seeds of hope growing all around her.